The night I walked around the side of my house and saw two teenage boys I had never seen before, standing at my gate with bolt cutters on my lock. That was the moment I realized just how far my HOA president was willing to go to pretend my backyard was the community's lake. I asked them what they were doing, and one of them, red-faced and nervous, said, "Mrs. Karen said the lake is for everyone, and you were cool with it again." Like that was the most normal sentence in the world. My lock was bent. My hands were shaking, and all I could think was, this was the same woman who had already called 911 on me for stealing the lake, and now her story had traveled so far that strangers thought they could cut their way onto my property. Let me back up a little so this makes sense. I bought this house because of the lake, plain and simple. From the street, it is just another older place at the end of a cul-de-sac. Nothing fancy, but out back there is this narrow strip of grass that slides down to a small boathouse and a simple wooden dock sticking out into the water. The kind of thing you see in a magazine and tell yourself, one day when things finally work out. I am a morning person. I love quiet, and the idea of drinking coffee with my feet up on my own dock before work got me through a lot of long weeks. During the inspection, the previous owner, an old widower named Hank, pointed at the path and said kind of offhand, "A couple neighbors use it. Sometimes, never been a problem, and in my head, that meant okay. He let a friend cut through once in a while, no big deal. Not, congratulations. Your backyard is now a public beach. A week after moving in, right when the boxes were still half unpacked, and I was figuring out which light switch did what I met her. You already know the type. Her name is Karen. Of course, clipped blonde hair. Athleta leggings. A plastic cup of white wine at 5 in the afternoon, and the posture of someone who has never hesitated to tell a grown adult that their garbage can is half an inch over the line. She walked right up onto my porch, like she was doing a final walkthrough, stretched out her hand, and said, "I'm Karen, I'm the president of the HOA here. Not, I'm on the board. Not, I help out. Just straight up, I'm the president." She looked past me toward the lake like she was checking on something she managed. "We all share the lake down there," she said, very matter-of-fact. "Hank always let us use the path we do. Little campfires, kids' swims, birthday parties. It's kind of our thing. You're going to love it." I was tired. I was the new guy, and I didn't want to be that neighbor 5 minutes after closing. So I smiled and said something like, "Yeah, sounds nice," even though there was this small knot in my chest going, that's not exactly what Hank said. And at first, honestly, it was not terrible. On hot afternoons, a couple families would wander down the path, kids splashing in the shallows, parents sitting in camp chairs with beers. They would wave when I walked by. Nobody blasted music at midnight. Everyone left at a decent hour. And I told myself, this is fine. This is neighborly. Pick your battles. You know what I mean. But if you give someone like Karen something she can host on, she is not going to keep it small. She is the kind of person who collects people. Like other folks collect coffee mugs, and the lake was perfect social currency. A couple of families quietly morphed into whoever she knew from church work. Her Pilates class, friends of friends, cousins of friends. I would pull into the cul-de-sac after a long day. Sweat streaked from work, and there would be cars everywhere, half blocking my driveway. Kayaks strapped to roofs, coolers sweating on the curb, and random people I had never seen before, already halfway down the side of my house, like they were following a sign that said, "Public access." They would nod at me and say, "Karen said this is the way down," like I was the hired help. Little things started to grate on me. Crushed beer cans in the grass. Cigarette butts mashed into the dirt right at the edge of the water. A ring of stones from my landscaping turned into a makeshift fire pit, blackened and cracked from somebody's late-night marshmallow moment. Teenagers taking selfies on my dock with muddy shoes grinding into the wood. None of it was a full-on catastrophe. But every time I stepped outside, there was some reminder that this place I had dreamed about was slowly becoming everybody else's hangout, and somehow I was the one who felt like the intruder. I tried to handle it the soft way first. One afternoon, she had a group of moms down there. Kids screaming a Bluetooth speaker playing sugary pop across the water sunscreen. Smell hanging in the air, and I pulled her aside. I told her as calmly as I could. Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I need people to ask before they come down. If someone slips on that path or falls off the dock, that's on me, my insurance, not the HOA. She tilted her head, gave me that overbright host smile, and said, "Oh, totally, I get it. I always tell people to be careful, nobody's going to sue you. We're neighbors." She took what I said and twisted it into something friendlier and meaningless, then walked right back to her crowd like the conversation was done, and nothing changed. If anything, it got louder. There was a birthday party where they tied balloons to my railing and left paper plates blowing across my yard. One night, I came home to find my landscaping stones rearranged into a fire ring and a pile of charred sticks where somebody had poked their s'mores. The last straw was quiet. No screaming. No cops. Just a stupid detail that snapped something in my brain. It was a Sunday morning, my favorite time to fish that soft light when the lake looks like glass. I walked down the hill with my coffee and rod, already picturing that first cast, and I stepped on something that crunched under my boot. I looked down, and there was broken glass glittering in the grass, the bottom of a beer bottle shattered in pieces, inches from where I usually drop my tackle box. All I could see in my head was a kid running barefoot, or my mower hitting that and turning it into shrapnel. I just stood there for a minute, coffee in my hand, listening to the quiet, and that gentle, keep the peace part of me finally gave way to something else. Not rage exactly, just this very calm voice that said, "Okay, enough." I went back inside, sat down at my laptop, and emailed the HOA management company, copied the board address for good measure. I wrote, "Hi, I'm on lot 11. Can you clarify who actually owns the path to the lake next to my house? Is it common area or part of my property?" 2 days later, they sent me the plat map from the county. This black and white drawing with thin lines and numbers. I printed it, spread it on my kitchen table, and traced it slowly with my finger. The path from the sidewalk all the way down to the water line, and the boathouse was entirely within my lot. Lines clearly marked no easement, no little strip labeled common. Whatever informal tradition had existed under Hank was just that. A favor, not a right. I sat there for a long time listening to somebody's mower down the street, and the distant sound of kids shrieking around the cul-de-sac staring at those lines. And then I called a fencing company. A week later, 2 guys in a truck showed up, drilled holes, set posts, and by that evening, there was a simple black metal gate at the top of the path. I painted a small sign and screwed it into the post. Private property. Lake access by permission only. It felt weirdly serious standing there, with a drill over 4 words like I was finally locking a door everyone had been pretending was wide open. For 2 days, nothing happened. People walked by and glanced at the gate. Karen didn't wave from her front porch. There was this feeling in the air like when a storm is out there somewhere, but hasn't hit yet. On the morning of day 3, right at 6 a.m., There was loud pounding on my front door. I opened it half awake in a t-shirt and gym shorts, and there she was in full workout gear. Ponytail, high clipboard in one hand and a printed notice in the other. "You can't do this," she snapped, thrusting the paper at my chest. "You're blocking community lake access. This is an official violation, $250 if you don't remove that gate by Friday." The letter had the HOA logo, some vague reference to shared amenities, and her signature at the bottom with President in bold. I looked at it, then at her, and said, "The management company sent me the county plat showing that path is entirely on my lot. There is no shared access down there." She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Hank always let us use it," she said. "It's basically tradition. You don't get to just shut down the lake." Then she turned and walked off like she had just delivered a court order. I thought that was the big blow-up. It wasn't. That Saturday, I was out mowing the front yard when 2 police cruisers eased into the cul-de-sac and stopped right in front of my house, lights flashing red and blue, reflecting off the lake and my little aluminum boat, like this was some kind of crime scene. Karen was standing by the gate with her phone pressed to her ear, kids hanging back, and I could hear her loud voice carrying, "He locked the whole neighborhood out of the lake. It's always been community access. He can't do this." One officer stepped out, thumb hooked near his belt, eyes moving from the gate to her, to me. "You the homeowner?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, wiping sweat off my forehead. "Apparently, also the guy who kidnapped a lake." His mouth twitched like he wanted to smile, but he kept it professional. He walked over to me and said quietly, "Just tell me what's going on from your side." And I showed him the plat map on my phone. The email from management explained the parties the trash, the glass, that I'd put the gate up only after confirming the land was private. He nodded, asked a few basic questions. When I installed it, whether there had been any fights, if anyone had permission before. The kind of stuff, you can tell, he has asked 100 times. Then he went back to his partner, who was dealing with Karen. I watched them talk, saw her gesturing at the lake like it was a crime scene. The older officer finally said loud enough that I could catch most of it, "Ma'am, the documentation shows this path is entirely on his property. This is not a criminal issue. If there's a disagreement, it's a civil or HOA matter. 911 isn't the right place for this." You could feel the mood shift. A couple of my neighbors were standing at the edges of their driveways pretending to check mail, and you could see them realizing this might not be as clear-cut as she had told them. Karen's face went from confident to stunned to insulted in about 3 seconds. "So you're not going to do anything," she said. "He's just allowed to block us out." "It's his property," the officer repeated. "We can't force him to remove a gate from land he owns." They left after that, just a reminder to both of us to call the non-emergency line next time. As their taillights disappeared, Karen walked up my driveway just far enough so I could hear her, and hissed, "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're picking a fight with," then turned on her heel and stalked away. The following week was this weird mix of quiet and tension. No one came down the hill, no more parties, but you could feel eyes on you when you stepped onto your porch. Conversations went a little too still when I walked by, and it was very obvious that she had been telling her version of events to anyone who would listen. It felt like I had become a character in a story she was narrating. The selfish guy who stole the kids' lake, and the part that really stung was knowing I had tried to talk first. One afternoon, my neighbor Tom walked down to the dock and sat beside me, staring out at the water. After a long minute, he said, "For what it's worth, you're not crazy. A lot of us thought it got out of hand down here. Nobody wanted to be the one to tell Karen no." That meant more than I expected. A few days later came the HOA meeting. Normally I avoid those, but after the whole 911 show, I figured I should at least hear what was being said about me. The room was half full, people clutching printed agendas that buzzing fluorescent light hum. They did the usual budget stuff, then got to new business, and before the words were out, Karen's hand was up. She stood and addressed the room like a politician. "I'd like to talk about the privatization of lake access on Lot 11, she said. She talked about 4 years of community use, birthday parties and family memories, and losing a space that made the neighborhood special. The way she framed it, I wasn't a guy putting a lock on his own gate with a county map in his inbox. I was some villain shutting down a public park on a whim. When they asked if I wanted to respond, I got up heart-pounding and said, I didn't block access to the lake. I blocked unsupervised access to my property. Those are not the same thing. I handed the plat map to the board, explained the parties, the trash, the broken glass that I had asked for boundaries before I put up the gate. The management company representative confirmed on the record that the path was fully on my lot. When they asked Karen if she disputed the documents, she hesitated, then said, "No, but it still feels wrong." And honestly, that was the whole problem in one sentence. Facts in front of her feelings, arguing with reality. Now, here is where the twist comes in. You would think that after the cops and the HOA documents, the story would slow down. Everyone would adjust to the new normal. Instead, it got sneakier. Karen didn't try to fight me directly anymore. She switched to spinning the story in softer ways. A few days after the meeting, her husband Mark came down the hill one evening, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. He apologized for the police, admitted he hadn't loved all the random people in the neighborhood either, and said, "She feels like she lost something, like she failed the community. If you could just maybe let the kids come down once in a while, supervise no more parties, it would go a long way." I thought about it, because I am not a monster, and I told him, maybe, but it has to be clear. You or Karen text me first. Okada, guests of guests. This is not open to the neighborhood again. He nodded, grateful, and I walked back up the hill, thinking maybe, just maybe, we had finally found middle ground. Less than 24 hours later, I started getting notes, a folded piece of paper in my mailbox. "So glad the lake situation is resolved. Will you take down the gate soon?" A text. "Heard you opened things up again, thank you." An email from somebody down the street thanking me for restoring access. And then that stranger at my gate with the old fishing rod smiling and saying, "Karen said the path is open like before. Mind if I head down?" That was the twist for me, the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. We could have a conversation in my backyard, where we agreed on very specific, reasonable boundaries, and within a day, she had translated that into, "Don't worry, everyone, the lake is ours again." Her need to be the one who took care of the community was stronger than any map, any email, any gate. And that is how we get to the boys with the bolt cutters. After I sent them home and felt my pulse stop buzzing in my ears, I knew I couldn't just keep reacting. I walked straight to Karen's door and knocked. When she opened it and saw me, she looked surprised, not angry. I said, "We need to talk," and she stepped outside, arms folded, but not fully defensive yet. I told her exactly what had happened, word for word, what those kids said. How they believed the lake was open again because she had said so. For the first few minutes, she did what she always does. Downplayed, called it a misunderstanding. I never told anyone to cut anything. Teenagers do dumb stuff, which sure they do, but they don't usually bring bolt cutters to a stranger's gate unless some adult has told them that gate shouldn't be there. Then, somewhere in the middle of me explaining how tired I was of being the villain in a story. I didn't write something in her face shifted. The defensiveness dropped just a little, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she looked actually embarrassed. She admitted she missed the way things used to be, the parties, the kids running free, that it made her feel like she was doing something that mattered for the neighborhood. And closing the gate felt like I wasn't just shutting down lake access. I was shutting down that role she had built for herself. I told her as gently as I could, "This doesn't have to be you failing. It just has to be different. You can't keep speaking for my property. You can't keep telling people I agreed to something I didn't. That's not community. That's you writing a script the rest of us didn't sign." She went quiet for a long moment, eyes shiny, and then she said, "I didn't realize how far it had gone. I didn't think it would spread like that. I'm sorry." And for the first time, it didn't sound like a performance. Over the next few days, I watched her actually follow through. She talked to neighbors, not in a big, loud announcement way, but one by one, telling them the path was private, that if they wanted to go down, they needed to ask me. The texts stopped. The little pressure notes in my mailbox stopped. Her kids still came by sometimes, but they asked, and when they did, they were respectful and careful, and honestly, I didn't mind. Life on the street settled into a different kind of normal. The gate stayed locked. The lake was quieter. People still walked their dogs and waved. There were still barbecues up on the cul-de-sac, but that constant sense of my backyard being the town square faded, and with it a lot of resentment I hadn't even realized I was carrying. One evening later that fall, I sat on the dock as the sun went down, water going dark and still, and I realized something kind of funny. Everyone had been so afraid that the gate would divide the neighborhood, that drawing a hard boundary would ruin the community feel. But without that line, we were on track for lawsuits, injuries, fights at every HOA meeting. The gate didn't kill the community. It saved it from a slow burn of resentment and entitlement. The lake didn't change, the dock didn't move an inch. The property lines were the same as the day I closed. The only thing that really shifted was that I stopped letting someone else's feelings rewrite what was actually mine. So let me throw it to you, because I know not everyone sees this the same way. If it were you, and you had a path like that by your house, would you have kept it open for tradition and put up with the trash, the noise, the glass, the cops at your driveway? Or would you have locked the gate too and taken the social hit? Do you think I overreacted? Or did the HOA president go too far, using her title to tell people my land was still theirs? And bigger than that, do you think HOAs protect neighborhoods? Or do they just give people like Karen a badge to push past other people's boundaries? Tell me in the comments whose side you're on, and why, and if you've ever had your own version of a community space that was actually just your stuff. I'd really like to hear how you handled it.